El Cholo's at it again.
I think this is Atlético Madrid. Sometimes they can do the best and sometimes they can do the worst.
The only difference is this time, La Liga is panning out just the way Diego Simeone will want it to. Simeone is building an army at Atletico Madrid, and by the time the world realizes what's going on, it just might be too late to stop them. He's football's very own bad guy. You cannot overemphasize the fact that Diego Simeone is as important to the club as the legendary players on the field. The players, the fans, they'll follow him to any lengths, and that's because as a player, El Cholo did the same. For Simeone, it's always been football. Born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, Diego Simeone had a dream just like any other Argentine kid at the time, and that was to play football. His journey began at Vélez Sarsfield, where he impressed as a midfielder. Diego Simeone at the time was a guy in the middle who could do everything. He could defend, attack, the all-action box-to-box midfielder. In fact, he was so good with Vélez Sarsfield that he became a regular with the squad, and by 1998 he was making his debut for the Argentine national team. This was off the back of an impressive spell at Vélez, where he'd scored 14 goals in 76 games, and this impressive form earned El Cholo a move to Europe. Italian football with Pisa. At the time, the club had just gained promotion to Serie A, and it was a chance for Simeone to put himself against some of the best players in the world, because back then, where the real action was at was in Serie A. Unfortunately for Simeone and Pisa, it didn't quite work out. They failed to beat the drop in their first season, and by the second, failed to gain promotion from Serie B. Still, Simeone had done enough to show there was a player in there who had the potential to become a lot more, and as a result, a move came calling that changed his life and began the version of Diego Simeone the world knows now. Combative, hooligan, bad guy. That's what Simeone was at Sevilla, and not because it's what he wanted to be, but it's what he had to become. Simeone was living a dream and had to adapt. He was playing alongside his idol Diego Maradona. In Simeone's words, as he states above, where Maradona attacked, he defended. Sevilla back then was a team many people didn't like playing against, almost hated, but the talent the team had still showed through. Maradona only lasted one season, but even more so, there was another man who shaped the image of Simeone we know today. Carlos Bilardo, the coach of the Argentine national team that had won the World Cup in 1986, and 6 years on, had brought his style of football to Spain, anti-football. It was negative, die-hard football, but when it worked, it worked. Bilardo and Simeone's relationship didn't last long, however. By 1994, he was off to his next team, Club Atlético de Madrid. Honestly, being the type of player he was at the time, Simeone and Atleti were made for each other. How? Well, Simeone was a fighter. That's what Bilardo and the time he spent at Sevilla had taught him to be. Atlético Madrid was, and still is, a club that's always fighting, both on the pitch and off it. They've always been in the shade of the other Madrid team, Real Madrid. And having to deal with financial and political issues, Simeone moving to the club was Atleti getting a fighter in midfield. It peaked for Los Rojiblancos in the 1995-96 season. Against the odds, they ended up winning La Liga and the Copa del Rey, with Diego Simeone playing a key role in that. What they had to contend with was a Barcelona Johan Cruyff-led dream team, which was fading, but still a team nonetheless. Still, only 24 at the time, he'd become a cult hero and set the scene for what was to come. Simeone left Atleti to join Inter Milan in 1997, and to him, he felt like he had unfinished business back in Italy. It was during this period he had that infamous moment back in 1998. Getting David Beckham sent off at the World Cup, a master of the dark arts already at the time, this moment was iconic for what was to come. Think about it as David Beckham, the flash player and headline maker, the one on the front pages and cover star. But Diego Simeone, the man from Buenos Aires, less known, a hard worker with wit and a determination to win no matter the cost, had done a job on England's star man. After his time at Inter, he had a spell at Lazio before he returned home. Now captain of the club, Simeone returned as a man who had seen everything. Atletico Madrid proved to be his last club in Europe. He was back home playing for Racing Club in Argentina before hanging up his boots and going straight into management. Simeone the player was done, and it was now time for Simeone the manager. No sooner has he ended his spell at Racing Club than he became a manager. The measure of success he enjoyed early on was mixed. It couldn't have gotten off to a better start. He led Estudiantes to their first league title in 23 years in 2006 after joining from Racing Club, but he left the club in 2007 after a mixed run of results. His next spell was at River Plate, where in 2008 he was once again league champion. But after getting eliminated from the 2008 Copa Sudamericana, Simeone resigned. He was soon back in the managerial role with San Lorenzo in 2009, but a year later in 2010, Simeone resigned. Mixed spells in coaching up to that point, but the die-hard Simeone was never going to quit. If playing under Bilardo at Sevilla made him the hard player he was, taking the job at Catania was the final piece into creating the Simeone we know as a coach, the 5 months that made him. When he joined Catania, they were a team in danger of being relegated. Appointing Simeone seemed like the logical replacement. Just looking at the Catania squad list from that season, they had 12 players in the team from Argentina. Getting a coach like Simeone, who was also Argentine, but more importantly had played in Italian and understood the Italian game, just made sense. And it did. Catania under Simeone was the formation of the classic Simeone style of football we've come to love with Atletico Madrid, which we'll get to later. Using the 4-2-3-1 or 4-3-1-2, it was about sitting and absorbing the opposition attacks while being dangerous on the counter. They were happy to concede the ball so long as it meant they'd be able to attack the opposition where it hurt most. The 5 months he spent with Catania made him a team battling the drop. They finished with 46 points, the best ever total in the league. Simeone had instilled an us against them mentality at the club, and at the end went back to Argentina to coach Racing Club. But in 2011, El Cholo was back home again, only this time on the sidelines. 2011, Simeone was appointed as the new coach of Atletico Madrid, but he could not have gone off to a better start. Before I get into that, just in case you haven't hit that subscribe button to Football Historia yet, just hit that button below. Simeone's first season at Atletico Madrid was special. They beat Racing Club in an all-Spanish final in the Europa League, and by 2012 they'd announced themselves to the rest of Europe. August 2012, he began the season with a 4-1 demolishing of the Champions League winners Chelsea in the UEFA Super Cup final. And in the following season, he added a very special trophy to the mix. The Copa del Rey final, after beating city rivals Real Madrid. This one was extra special because it was a sign of things to come. El Cholo was building, and that siege mentality he had on the team was starting to yield results. The 2013-14 season is one Atletico Madrid fans will never forget. Against the odds, with the dominance of Barcelona and Real Madrid still in play, Simeone's Atletico Madrid team managed to break the jinx. They won La Liga, averaging just 49.1% possession. What this means is that Simeone adopted the tactics he used at Catania. Give the opposition the ball as long as it doesn't hurt them, and when it's time to strike on the counter, they're deadly to effect. That season, they also got to the quarter-finals of the Champions League for the first time. They beat the record again. They eliminated Barcelona in the quarter-finals, and in what was a masterful battle of wit, did a job on Jose Mourinho's Chelsea turf. He beat them 3-1 on the night and on aggregate to advance to the final. They almost won it in Lisbon before that extra-time header from Sergio Ramos condemned the team to a 4-1 defeat. Over the years that followed, Simeone continued to produce classic Atletico teams that featured his style and how he wanted to play. And although the football was largely negative, it produced results. By 2016, they were in another Champions League final to Real Madrid but lost again. By 2018, they won the Europa League for the second time under Simeone, won the UEFA Super Cup in the same year, and only 3 years later, won La Liga again in 2021. Let's fast forward to the present day. See guys, the reason we went through this detailed history of Simeone is to understand what the man is, what made him, why he sets his teams up the way he does, and to counter a couple of notions, the first of which is that he plays haram football.
I think after watching Atletico Madrid, there are a misconception, wrong conception about the way he played.
Even Pep Guardiola knows that there is a misconception about the way Atletico Madrid is perceived.
Atletico Madrid kill football.
That's the misconception, the first one. It's that they play defensive football, park the bus if you like, and are boring at times. To answer this, here's what Simeone had to say about his team a couple of months back.
El objetivo que traza el club todas las temporadas para seguir creciendo como club, como viene creciendo hace 12 años, es entrar en Champions. ¿Qué quiere decir eso? Antes era entre los 3 primeros, hoy es entre los 4 primeros, y ese es el objetivo primordial.
Each season, the realistic goal is to qualify for the Champions League and finish in the top 4. So what does this have to do with the tactics? Well, let's look at Atleti again. Remember when we said earlier that they were always in the shadow of Real Madrid when Simeone joined as a player? Well, much hasn't changed. Diego Simeone is a manager who knows how to make the most of what he's got. He's been realistic with his approach and sometimes comes out as misunderstood. That Atletico Madrid is a big team in the modern game now. Comes down to Simeone and his ability to get the players to stick to the task and be dogged.
I think today, for the first time in the first half, I see a team play 5-5, no striker. So it's very hard to find the spaces.
Remember Kevin De Bruyne complaining about Simeone's 5-5-0? Let's dive into that a bit. If Atletico Madrid had actually come out against that City team with the form they were on, City would have eventually found the spaces to play into and beaten them. That's just a reality. Simeone knew this and put out a side he knew would be able to compete. To play for Simeone means to give everything.
With Simeone, I don't think he could ever manage in England just purely because when he was speaking in the dressing room before any game, he was so passionate and the emotion from him was so high. You know, you're just like ready to go to war for him.
Kieran Trippier explains it best. Every game with Simeone is a battle. The league itself is a war for Simeone. The mentality he took from Bilardo at Sevilla, that's what it means for him. To play football is to survive. They love him at Atletico Madrid. His style of play, however negative it is timeless. Again, it's with the siege mentality. That's what it means to play for Simeone. It's to understand that in that game, at that moment, they cannot take any prisoners. On the touchline with Simeone, it's pure passion. He doesn't hide. 11 years in, and yet every game means more to Simeone. You see the way he gesticulates on the sides, the way he gets the home crowd going. They'll stop at nothing until the game is done. Another thing to note with Simeone is that he's got his style of players, his brand. Listen to him talk about building players here, and you understand what he means by this. Simeone loves working with relatively unknown players and developing them from the ground up, because that's, to him, the best reward any manager can ever get. Not trophies, not titles, but as he said, seeing a player grow. So what's a typical Diego Simeone player? Well, I could name a few. Koke, Diego Godín, Stefan Savic, Angel Correa, Antoine Griezmann, Jan Oblak and Gabby. Notice anything similar about these guys? They're players who are talented, no doubt, but also have that extra wit to get around games. Guys like Angel Correa and Stefan Savic when he was at the club? Diehards, they never quit. Antoine Griezmann, the clever player in front, knits it all together. This season they've added Julian Alvarez to the mix as well as Conor Gallagher, and with both players you can see what Simeone is about. With a player like Julian Alvarez, for example, it's the same profile of attacker as Angel Correa, maybe even better. Clever enough to find spaces and be clinical on the counter, but also very effectively can press. You could say Conor Gallagher is an English prototype of Simeone.
I love this one, man. I really do. You talk about having that Atleti blood. I think Gallagher's got it. And maybe he doesn't know it yet, but it's going to be activated once he gets into training under Simeone.
It's like talking about Diego Simeone only 20 years earlier. Behind only Frank Schmidt, who has been at Heidenheim for a staggering 17 years, Diego Simeone is the second longest serving manager in the European top 5 leagues, after having spent 13 years at the club. If he wasn't good, he wouldn't have spent that long at the club. They love Simeone. It's impossible to think about Atletico Madrid without mentioning Simeone at the helm of affairs. This season in La Liga, Simeone's Atletico Madrid team is quietly on the rise. A 4-3 win against Sevilla, beating Sparta Praha 6-0 in the Champions League, beating PSG at the Parc des Princes in the same competition, typical Atletico Madrid results. It's managers like Simeone that make the game what it is now, an interesting mix of style and personas. Simeone is one of the OG managers. He's had to evolve to compete with a new crop of managers in the game now. One of them is Manchester United's Ruben Amorim, fresh off beating Manchester City in the derby. He's instilled a mentality in the current United team his players have to be wary of. Want to know what it is? It's all in the next video.